that business bank account sitting at zero actually started to weigh on me. I certainly had feelings about it, like, oh my God, if somebody hits me with something, what do I do?
You are listening to the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Fosivity, where we answer your questions and simplify information security for small businesses. Get the clarity you need to focus on the things that matter.
Hey there! Welcome back and thanks for listening today. We're back with the final installment in our series of special episodes about starting a business. The normal call-in radio format will be back in January. As usual, Joe Brinkley, the blind hacker, is here with me, and we're going to pick up where we left off again. If you're just listening for the first time, you should consider going back to the first episode in this special series so that you can start from the beginning. We've covered an awful lot of ground to get to this point, and it'll probably be pretty helpful if you're thinking about starting a business, at least, to go back and start there instead of here. We are approaching this topic from the perspective of starting a cybersecurity consulting business, but like before in any of the prior episodes, everything we're talking about today is still going to apply in any kind of service business. All right, let's get back to it, shall we?
Do the cybersecurity risks to your business have you confused? Visit Fosivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast and sign up to be a caller on a future episode.
Hey, Joe, welcome back.
Hey, cheers. I think everything we've talked about has been great news, and it's been all positive, and we've wanted to pump people up. I definitely think let's start this with some potential challenges, and there's a lot of challenges, and ultimately I've been asked a few times, do I think it's worth it? Like, heck, again, I'm not making a ton of money here, but I think ultimately the expansion of freedom in my general day-to-day life, with a little bit of the freedom of, if things at my job don't go well, is it the end of the world? Am I up a certain creek of not good matter, or am I okay? The answer to that is a little bit of both, right? It's not going to be great, because for me it's not my full time, but it means that, hey, maybe that's the opportunity I need for it to become that. But I think so far in my experience, it's bum deal to pay all these extra taxes and all these extra fees. Again, being registered now for the corporate transparency, that cost me another $150. But I still feel like it allows me to have a certain level of freedom. And the whole reason we did this was because of concern for others who might have interest and not know these certain things. Like, when you start a business, you're going to have to adhere to so many things that we've talked about: laws, regulations, make sure you don't pierce the corporate veil, make sure you don't do these things. And some of that's a little bit illegal, and some of that, again, is a little bit, I think, based on government and foundations of making sure that things are safe. For the most part, is the idea behind a lot of those rules. But it's still going to cause hurdles, and certainly things that you didn't expect.
Yeah, good points. I mean, we've been talking so far, and a lot of this has been happy path stuff, as I refer to, where everything goes right as you go through. But you can potentially have problems in the business, and that's one of the big things that we want to go through it and just kind of talk about a little bit today, just because it's not always the happy path. There's challenges
It's going
as
to be
well.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned speed bumps in the registration process. That isn't something that I personally experienced, because I paid a lawyer to help with filings. So I didn't run into any weird problems with delays, doing
Yep.
something wrong, those kinds of things. Now, obviously, there's probably not a lot of speed bumps you're going to have in the registration process for your business. But depending on the type of business, you may have some speed bumps in other registration processes as you're setting things up, not creating the business entity itself, but as you're starting to do sales and marketing, and those types of things.
Yeah.
One of the areas that I've been able to get some leads through is sort of a state feed. So I got signed up with the state to get notifications when opportunities for certain types of things came up. Now, none of them so far have been a fit for me, but it's a feed that I at least look at to see if there's opportunities that I might want to bid for, even though I tend to try to avoid doing, government contracts and those kind of things. This is more like municipal level um, contracts. But
Yeah.
as I went through that process, it was a little frustrating because it wasn't clear. So there were some speed bumps in getting registered with that system. So you may have some things here and there that come up that make things a little slow. Things may not move as fast as you want. Uh, you start a business generally starting from zero. I think the biggest hurdle that folks have as they go through this is that slow ramp up to profitable. And luckily in a
Yeah.
service business, you don't have a lot of inventory and other like physical things you have to invest in first. So your margins are generally pretty high. So that helps with ramping up to being profitable. But when you're first trying to land your first few clients, that can be a little bit of a struggle. And we talked about a little bit about that at I think it was the first or second episode with, uh, having some cash and some runway and those types of things
Yes.
while you're getting going. But it's something definitely to be aware of. That you're going to be doing some hustling as you get out and are trying to get those first few few sales, first few clients in the process. And there's also this, when we look at profitability and margin, when you're the only person in the company, it's kind of difficult to separate in your head the business's profitability from your personal income. And you can
Hmm.
have situations where the business runs at a loss or runs maybe barely break even though and doesn't really make a profit, even though it has paid you as the owner. So if you're paying yourself a salary via W-2 or whatever, your personal income is an expense, as we said, to the business. So that's, something to be aware of there as you're getting things going and ramping up is making sure that you're able to pull enough money out of the business to pay yourself, but not necessarily pulling so much out that you choke the business out as well, because the
Yeah.
business has to have enough money to operate to cover its expenses. And we talk about business expenses in a prior episode as well.
I think the ultimate curve, right? There's always a curve involved. The ultimate curve towards profitability. Um, I agree. I definitely will say the first time I was doing, again, I've spoken about my less than successful business about at this point 14 years ago, from 2010 to 2012. Where I bit off more than I could chew. I was doing anything IT related, and I should have really, again, this is why when people ask me now, I say, now do the one thing you're really good at. Don't, oh yeah, sure, I'm an IT guy. I could go fix printers. I could go set up a website. I could go do this. I know a lot of people. You got to make sure your friends are available. You got to do, no, no, no. But certainly I, that first business, I was like, oh yeah, cool. I just made, I got the EIN, I had everything else going. When I got done with it and got that check from the client, I just made $12,000. I'm gonna pay myself $12,000. That's fine and dandy again when you have no other expenses. But by the way, if you're not expecting another paycheck, if you're not in the middle of other work and you get no other work coming in, that business bank account sitting at zero actually starts to, well, it started to weigh on me. I certainly had feelings about it, like, oh my god, this, if somebody hits me with something, what do I do? And now second time around, next gen red team, excellent, doing great. We get some work. I pay myself. I pay the mentees. I pay the employees. I pay for the software. I've got, we've talked about funding and financing. I've got funding and financing for it. I've got credit card. But I have made sure that all my expenses and all my profit net to the point where I feel personally comfortable where they're netting. And that's certainly, it's been a lot better this time. I have money in the bank, as it were, which is a lot better than the mistakes I was making before. And it certainly feels better. I can log into the bank account. If somebody comes to me and says, I need a job done immediately, and I look at it and say, you know what, this is a little easy for me, or this is too junior for me, and I contact a friend, I don't have to net 90 that friend or that employee, the person I asked to do the work. I can pay them usually upfront now. I don't. I'll still probably net 30 just to make sure the client has been happy, but I can at least say, hey, you know what? I'll give you half now, and then you wrap up. And once we have a successful venture, I can give you half. Then I've kept enough money in the business bank account that I have operationalized my income of the business, not my income anymore, but the business's income. I hope I'm using the right words there, because it certainly felt, this second time around feels a lot better. I've educated myself a lot more.
The way you deal with this, or at least the way that I deal with this, is to do a little bit of cash flow planning. I understand this is my expected revenue over the next, several months based on what's in my pipeline and existing contracts, those types of things. But I also know what expenses I'm anticipating through, business expenses, contract stuff. Like I know that my business insurance is an annual thing. It's going to renew every year in February. And that's a relatively large payment. So I have to be ready for that. So kind of knowing, and this is something you can track in Excel easily enough. If you've got QuickBooks or something, you can track these things in there. Uh, but just understanding what's coming up based on what subscriptions you have, whether things are monthly, annually, whatever those cadences of those different expenses are, as well as when you'll get paid. And that may also be based on payment terms. If you've got clients, you're doing work and maybe they're net 30, and maybe the client maybe ends up paying net 45. Like, you're going to do this work and send this invoice, but I'm not going to get that money for another 30 to 45 days.
Mm-hmm.
So having that cash flow and just kind of understanding cash flow in the business, and knowing like a threshold. That's something else I do is I have a threshold in my business bank account that when I'm doing, owner draws or, looking at cash flow planning, I don't want to go below a certain threshold in my account, because I know that if I dip below that, I'm potentially not going to have enough funds to pay, that next month's uh, business credit card bill that has, my typical expenses and those types of things on it, for example. So you can set those kinds of thresholds in there as well. And what a lot of organizations will do, or a lot of businesses will do, is they'll look at what size buffer, how many months of operating capital do I need to have on hand? And that's basically how many months worth of business expenses do I need to have on hand so that I'm not living check to check? Because when you get paid every 2 weeks as a W 2 employee, you get used to that cadence and you can expect it. Every 2 weeks, you're going to get this direct deposit. When you're the business owner, you've got accounts receivables. And you can look at that accounts receivable balance in QuickBooks and think, wow, I got $30,000 worth of work that I've done an invoice for and that people are going to pay me for, but you may not know when that money is coming in.
Yeah.
Uh, exactly. Like, they're good for it. You just don't know exactly when it's going to come in. So you need that buffer so that you're not living, instead of check to check, you're not living invoice to invoice with your business. And taxes play a part in that too, because if you're paying yourself with owner draws instead of as a W 2 employee, like we talked about in one of the early episodes, the owner draws, you got to set money aside for taxes. Whereas as a W-2 employee, when you run payroll, the taxes get pulled out there kind of automatically by your payroll provider. Uh,
Okay.
so you may have taxes that come up that you underestimated or something that you realize at the end of the year, like you want to leave a buffer for that kind of thing as well. So all of this comes into the cash flow planning. And when this becomes your livelihood and you don't have that W-2 paycheck coming in, you tend to have to have the discipline to manage the business finances a little bit more closely than a lot of people manage their personal finances,
Yeah.
just because of the fact that if you screw up your business finances and your business credit gets messed up and you have trouble paying your bills as a business, if your vendors or suppliers stop providing you services, like that can impact your ability to provide your services to your customers, which is now revenue impacting. So with personal finance, if you don't pay a bill, like, yeah, they might shut off your water. But if you don't pay a bill with your business and they shut down, all of a sudden now you can't deliver your product. You can't get paid. You can't make more money to pay that bill. It compounds. So everything in business has a cost that's different, a little bit different than things are with personal finance. So it's another really, really important thing there, just to make sure that you're kind of prepared and that you're doing that planning.
Certainly feels like a train wreck. You mentioned like the compounding. It starts to compress, and then when the next thing hits, the next thing hits, the next thing hits, the next thing hits, the next thing hits,
Yep.
and it's just this continuous like, oh crikey, where did we? What can we do? Well, nothing. You've got 4 million pounds of weight just still waiting to collide and keep pushing a little bit more, and that little bit more. You've all what's it? A train takes so many miles to stop if it's so heavy. And again, by the time this is debt and cash we're talking about. Well, if you miss that first bill and that vendor cuts off your access, then you can't get the results for another client or this and that and blah blah blah, blah and it starts to go down. Um, Things like that. So certainly be conscious of it. You said something, and from again, I think at some point I said, oh, business mentors, and at this point, to a degree, though we're peers on a podcast, I view my peers very much as mentors. You mentioned something, and I kind of haven't thought about this in any other way than the way that I've been doing it. So I'm curious, without me telling you the way that I've been doing it, but get your opinion first, and then see if I've been doing it. Again, not that your way is correct or the right way, but
Sure.
similar or dissimilar. You mentioned putting away the taxes, right? So, yay, I get my paycheck. I've now made my this is for a pass through entity. The money is ultimately taxed to me. Yes, there's a Schedule C, there's business, but LLC, everything in place. Do you, when you take like something like an owner draw, do you compensate for the taxes out of the money you're taking out? Oh, I'm taking $10,000. I should probably take 28% or 24% of this, or 20%, or insert number 20%, and put that away? Or do you go, okay, I'm going to pay myself $10,000, and then I will go to my business bank account and make sure that I have a compensating amount from the business account?
Yes. I try to set aside money for taxes. Uh, Now, I've only been doing this for a couple of years. In the very first year that I operated, I had no basis for what I was going to make and what my tax situation was going to be. So it was really hard to know what to set aside for that. Um, and the first year, again, it was that slow ramp up. So I didn't make a lot of money in that first year as I was getting the business set up and everything. Like I made enough to make ends meet,
Hmm.
but it wasn't, it wasn't replacing my prior salary as I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Uh, Last year, I switched to an S corp mid year, which also changes the game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm.
that made things interesting. Where again, I got to the end of the year, and I really didn't know what my tax situation was going to be until my tax professional was done. Um, and I will tell you, I celebrated the fact that when the tax professional, you know, turns the paper around and she says, all right, here, the total amount you owe was like, $10,800 or something. I'm like, yay, that's awesome. Because I was expecting like 25,000. um,
Okay.
but because, of the magic she works with business deductions and all of that kind of stuff, and just knowing how this stuff works, it was lower than where I expected. Um, this year, again, like I've got money set aside. I've been paying myself through payroll as a W-2. So there's taxes being withheld there, but I've also had some owner draws. So I do try to set money aside for those. But again, this year it's hard to know exactly how much to set aside. So this is my first full year as an S corp, which is going to help me understand now at the end of this year going forward. Like, it'll help me calibrate on what my tax situation I think is going to be year after year from this point going forward. Uh, but if I wasn't setting any money aside and I get to the end of the year not knowing what the situation's going to be, like, I can't count on a refund. Like when I was a W-2 employee, I generally got refunds.
Right.
Uh, so it wasn't a problem. But as a business owner, you can't count on refunds, so you have to be ready. And it's one of those things where you can either set money aside, or if you're saving, you can basically treat your savings as kind of that buffer, and then you just pull back what you need. And I know there's people that do it that way as well. They set money aside to invest or whatever, and then at the end of the year, if they need some for taxes, they pull a little bit out of that, whatever, and then they leave the rest in savings. So I don't know. How's that line up with your approach?
Well, I will say originally I would pay myself, though it's all again your money when you do it the way that I've been doing, you can pass through entity. Um, but I've actually recently have been doing it in a more this last year again. So I'm in my fourth year, kind of doing again just consulting that way too. But it's I think that I've been pulling it out, and this time I've been as I get paid inside of the banking tool that I use. I use one of these more modernish online banks. Fortunately, not one based around Silicon Valley Bank, but one of these other online banks, and they have these things they call buckets or envelopes, and so I can it's all goes to one literal account, but I can it percentages. It takes a percentage of the money and puts it into what it calls envelopes. So I can see I have taxes, I have owner compensation. So like taxes, I automatically put 20% of whatever I make right into there. And at the end of the year, if there's more in there, then I'm going to have to pay in taxes. Sure, after I pay the taxes of the following year, it can become my money. It can stay in the company. I can again keep using it to build the wealth. But I've been doing that, and then owner compensation. I actually turn, again, since this isn't my job, I've taken that only to 10%. So literally the other 70% of income usually sits there. I use that for when I go to conferences, when I make stickers, when I go to marketing things, when I do, if somebody comes to me and I need to sponsor them as an individual, buy a course for somebody I'm mentoring, because I can write that off because I'm doing it. The goal of Next Gen Red Team is to raise the next gen of Red Teamers, right? So I have felt comfortable mostly doing that through those accounts. Occasionally I still check with the accountant. Last year I checked with him that I bought a couple extra things, and again, I might have gone a little bit more overboard than I should have, because I definitely got to a point that I did get a little closer to that, we'll call it that operational expense level. But I had looked at it and said, okay, I can do this and still maintain a whole 6 months of business, or a whole 6 months of expenditures without any new business. Again, I'm running very lean. I pretty much leave all the money in there, draw what hey, I have done this much work this year. I'd like to pay myself. But well, I now take it out of the money. If I'm going to give myself some money, I kind of go, I'm actually going to make sure that there's an equal amount in that, the taxes for the whole company, because I know I'm going to be taxed on it anyway. But knowing that it's not going to be a expense that I can write off. There's a difference between an expense you can write off and the expense just to the company, right? That being your compensation in my case. So I was like, okay, all right, there's enough there. Cool. I feel okay taking that amount of money is the way I've been doing it now. Just again, I've been overfunding the company for sure, but again, it makes me feel a lot more secure when I go into, especially now being at the end of the year. Yes, I've got money to start off next year, even if I don't get any work for the first 6 months of the year. I can continue to pay the credit card. I can continue to pay the hosting bills for things. I can continue to pay for the academies, the further educations for some folks that are in my academy and things like that. So
Yep, my bank isn't quite as advanced as yours with the to be able to do the automation where you put money in and it automatically divvies it up into buckets. But I do have my business checking account that I use for operating, and then I've got a business savings account that I
yeah,
use to kind of accumulate funds. And I suppose a more direct answer to your initial question, because I realized I didn't truly answer that question, is I leave the money in the business. Like I pay myself what I need, but I don't pay my just because I made a bunch of money on a gig doesn't mean I pay myself as much as I can. I leave the money in the business. I let it accumulate because at the end of the year, I want to be able to work with my tax professional to make some decisions on, okay, now I've got this money accumulated in the business savings account. Some's going to go to taxes, but
yeah,
what goes to taxes is going to be affected by what flows through to me. So
yes,
that money's there. Now my business can put that in my solo 401k. Now that's no longer taxable. That's a business expense. It's pre-tax money because it's a traditional 401k. Uh, so I can make decisions of how much do I put in the 401k? Is there anything that the business needs? Does the company need to buy? Do I need to buy a new laptop for this next year? Should I do that now? Should I do that later? Like I can make those decisions with that cash in the last month and a half of the year that can help uh, inform my tax situation. And I can also decide: do I pay myself as a bonus through the W-2 process where taxes are held out, or do I pay it as profit distributions? That owner draw, uh, which doesn't have all the taxes taken out. There's still income tax that I'll owe on it, but like FICA and you know Social Security and that kind of stuff doesn't come out of that. It only comes out of the W-2 income. Like you can
right.
balance that. And so because of the fact that I'm a little stingy with what I pay myself throughout the year, or at least I try to be, uh, it gets me to the end of the year now where the company's got this money that I can now make some more strategic decisions about where does this money go? How do I pay myself to, meet, whatever strategy I want to meet with taxes versus business development and business investments and those kind of things.
Fair, yeah, okay. Like I said, I feel that I've made some foolish things, but I think that again, taking many year old me to this year old me, I feel like I've gotten better, and there's still room for growth. But I haven't done. If I go to I'll say the big boy courts, if I turn into the S corp, if I get through the double taxation, I get through all that. That makes a lot more sense, just to make sure. As the path through entity, I'm gonna be on the hook for it anyway. So to me, like, yeah, this time of year, yeah, I didn't buy anything exuberant for the Black Friday deals, but I got a couple pieces of additional hardware that I've been looking to add to the home server, and that I host things on for the business, right? Because while I love Google Cloud and OneDrive, Google Drive, all these other drives, Proton drives, all these other things that I do pay for. There's also just something to be said about a little bit of self-host with a nice one-time link that I can get to a client, just keeping that data off the internet, especially if they're a little bit more sensitive about things. That'll be my write-offs this year. So again, trying to do it wisely, as it were.
And, we don't want to talk about everything that just can go wrong. Like, we still want to talk about things that
Yeah, yeah,
what you can do, I suppose. Maybe not what, in the face of things not going the way you think. Like you've still got a lot that you can control. Uh,
absolutely.
One of my favorite quotes, we watched the Mike Tyson boxing match a few weeks ago, which kind of made me think of one of my favorite quotes. Uh, that's been attributed to him. I don't know for sure if he said it, but it's been attributed to him as something like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, it is attributed to him. Yep.
And so that's, I think, one of the keys to success in business is have a plan, but be willing to change that plan if necessary. Like, you don't want to just, pivot constantly. You still need to be strategic about it, but at the same time, you don't want to be so rigid in your plan
Mm-hmm.
that you don't change plans when it actually is appropriate to achieve success. Because if you're too rigid and you don't change, like, you can end up failing or costing yourself money or whatever, uh, simply because you just weren't willing to change track, change strategy,
Yep.
and kind of go in a new direction. And it doesn't have to be entire product line stuff. It could just be how you're approaching something internally with processes, and maybe some plan isn't working out the way you thought. Like, you don't have to just double down on it.
Just because it worked for, the other thing I see is just because it worked for, I've seen some of the businesses that I've been in for a long time bring in business gurus, investors, or board members who, oh, I've raised a multi-billion-dollar company, and they come over and I'm like, guys, that plan may have worked for them. It's not going to work for us. And then 6 months later, they go, you're right. It's that this thing isn't going to work for us. And, unfortunately, it took them 6 months to pivot. But they did. Now that I own the organization, like, yeah, certainly I agree with you. If I started along a path that, um, again, another phrase not attributed to Mike Tyson, but I'm sure somebody else, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yes.
I struggle with that so much. Like, oh, this isn't good enough. I can't release this code. This report is this, and I'm like, hey, this is a draft thing. This is, again, I struggle with that, but then I remind myself of the quote, and I take it. I take my work very seriously, but I can also look at it and go, all right, it's time just to say this is good enough.
There's a YouTuber that my wife watches. It's an artist, and he creates a lot of stuff. And one of the things that he says in his videos when he catches himself kind of going down a rabbit hole or a point of diminishing returns on some detail in the art that he's making is, it's not just good, it's good enough. And
Love it.
that line has stuck with me in the last couple of years, because it really is, it's so simple but profound at the same time, and it has really been helpful to me to help me break out of those loops that I get into where I'm, just I keep editing and I keep editing, and at some point, you know what, like, that sentence is good enough. Move on. Or that web page is good enough. That marketing copy, that whatever, that template is good enough. Move on. Uh, and not waiting until it's perfect to launch is another thing that people do when they're trying to start business. They want everything to be perfect because they have this ideal in their head of what they want it to look like. And this
Yeah,
kind of goes with that having a plan, but being willing to change as well. Is at some point you have to launch. Now, you don't want to be unprepared to go to work for your customers.
correct.
Like, being unprepared is a problem, but not having your service offering 100% like perfect either isn't necessary, because your customers don't know what's in your head of what you conceived that this could look like. So they just want to know, am I getting the value that I'm paying for? And that's a big piece of it. So if you wait until it's perfect to launch, you're going to be way too late. You may run out of runway, and end up having to fold. If you don't have enough cash on hand or whatever, just get out there and start doing it. Like, as we talked about one of the early episodes,
Yep.
test it. You don't even have to have the LLC to just test an idea that maybe this service, maybe I could get customers. Um, so I think that's a huge thing there, is just, like you said, let perfect be the enemy of good,
Yeah.
and be willing to change the plan and go.
There was a TikTok or a short form video. I don't remember if it was a real TikTok. Something I consumed recently, and this is the other thing that this kind of was profound to me. I never thought of it this way. Everybody goes, I have $1 million idea, and then you say it, and then someone's like, that's stupid, or that's this. And this guy, uh, I don't remember. I think it was a different country for sure, but it was he said he wanted to go harvest grapes, freeze them, put them in a bucket, put them in a packaging, clean them, put them in packaging, and sell frozen grapes. But he did it with a twist. He had a little bit different marketing. It wasn't in a plastic thing. It was in a cardboard, like a very nice cardboard box. So now and his goal was like, hey, I'm not using any plastic in my products, things like that. So it's the selling grapes with twist. And I was like, okay, well, he was told it was dumb. It was this, like, you're competing against Kroger, the giant, insert your local grocery. You're competing with them. Well, okay, he's still successful. The guy's done well enough that he now does other frozen fruits that keep well frozen: blueberries, cranberries, mangoes, and he himself has still made a lot of money. And I'm just like kind of watching the video, like thinking about it, going, oh, you know what? It wasn't the perfect idea. I'm sure that wasn't his original plan. Maybe he was going to do this, but somebody told him that was stupid. But then he's like, no, I'm going to do this one thing because I know I can do it good. My grapes are good, or whatever the case may be. But again, proceeded forward with the plan. You know what? Go ahead, compete against the people much bigger than you. It's fine. Do it.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, there was a time where I felt that way. If I had an idea and then I found out, oh, somebody's already doing it, oh, now I can't do it because it's already done.
Yeah.
Businesses don't have to be original. Like that was something that was a real turning point for me mentally, with business. When somebody called out to me, I think this was in one of my business school course. I think I had a management professor, if I'm remembering correctly, is who said this to me, but said that if somebody else is already doing it, that just proves to you that there's a market for this. If nobody else is doing it, that actually should be more scary to you because now you have to go and test and determine that there actually is a market for this idea. If there's already people out there doing it, that confirmed for you, yes, there is a market. Now I just have to differentiate myself somehow. I'm not the only guy out there doing virtual chief information security officer advisory consulting. I'm not the only one doing security assessments. Same way you're not the only one doing pen tests out there. Like there's lots of people that do what we do. And that's no reason to not get into the game. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a huge thing. The fact he's competing against the big players in the field, like he already knows there's a market out there for this stuff. Yeah. It's for grapes and berries and that kind of stuff. Like they're doing it. They're making money at this. So I'm going to get in on that. And he found a way to differentiate himself. And that was the important piece there.
I figured you'd like that. I liked it a lot. I was like, oh, you know what? That's right. And I didn't even think about that until that. Yeah, like, you know what? I didn't have to build a pen testing market. I don't have to build a market from scratch. I don't know. Is there a market for pen testing? The question is, yes. Is there a market for maybe some of my rarer skills? Is there a market for me writing malware for a lot of clients? No, no, there's certainly not. I think that brings to clear evaluation. If you have an idea, maybe try it. Again, maybe you'll be the first technical VCISO out there and go, you know what? I want to not only create policies, but make sure that the technical controls for those policies are placed, and I'm going to help them put those in. Hey, fantastic, do it. Even though you could be really good at a lot of things initially, like you said, experiment, figure it out as you grow. As you do these other things, make sure that you don't hurt yourself, don't burn out. Find a capacity that makes sense for you. Don't do 90-hour work weeks. Sure, some work weeks I do 90 hours, guaranteed. But if you're doing it every single week just to make a few bucks,
it's so easy to, I mean, the people joke, oh yeah, I left my full-time job, working 40, 50 hours a week, whatever. And now I'm self-employed and I'm working 80 hours a week.
Yep.
Because it's easy to fall into that trap. Part of why I started doing this in the first place was to have more control. And I'm only half joking when I've said before on Twitter and whatnot. Like I'm self-employed now, and my boss is still a jerk. Like, like I'm realizing I had to come to grips with my own culpability in burning myself out when I was working for other people, and I have to be that much more careful about it. Now I have more control and more leeway to do something about it, but I will still put myself in that position if I'm not careful. And and it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners do is they work themselves to the bone, uh, partially trying to scrimp and save, penny wise, pound foolish, or, whatever it is they say, where
Mm-hmm.
they're going to spend, a dollar's worth of time to save 2 cents, or something. Uh, that doesn't scale. Uh, so that's one of those things, like you said, understanding your capacity and how that needs to balance between billable time, what you're doing for customers versus administrative overhead of running the business, doing your expenses and all your bookkeeping and your advertising and your marketing and that kind of stuff. Uh, you've got to balance that, and you've got to know where your limits are. And it's okay to push, in short periods of time. But like if you get to the end of a year and you realize, man, I've worked 80 hours a week and haven't taken any time off all year, and you're self-employed, you're doing something wrong. It's not healthy, and you are going to burn yourself out. So you got to be
For
really,
sure.
really careful there. Um, and like you said, don't try to do everything. Outsourcing. A lot of people look at outsourcing and it gets a bad name because people immediately think of outsourcing to other countries. Manufacturing's been outsourced to other countries and people lose their jobs, here in America when that happens. That's at one scale or, one way that works. But in small business, when you're working with other small businesses, especially if your company needs something done, like if I need a logo designed, I'm not good at that.
Right.
It's not going to look great. It's not going to be an effective logo. And it's going to take me 20 or 30 hours to mess around with it and get it to where I want. Whereas I can pay $250 to a designer, have them turn around in a couple of days, 3 different concepts. I pick one, give them some feedback. 2 more days later, I've got a near final version of a logo. I haven't spent hardly any time on it. I get what I need for $250. Like that's a force multiplier because I was able to, instead of spending that 20 or 30 hours working on trying to do a logo, to work on my business, to go do client work at significantly higher effective hourly rates
Correct.
than
Yeah.
that. Uh, so outsourcing is a force multiplier. Like it can be a weighted term and has a connotation with it, but as a business owner, you've got to have that mental shift and see it as a force multiplier. It's going to cost you a little bit of money, but it's going to save you time. And we talked a little bit about nothing's free if you don't value your time. In business, everything has a cost, including your time, because you have a finite amount of capacity to invest in your business time wise without burning yourself out. So if you can pay somebody a little bit of money to save you time and let you focus on a higher value thing, that's the crux of outsourcing. And it's a very sound business practice that you just, as a small business owner, it's really important to understand and use wisely, because that's what is going to keep you from burning yourself out. Um, and it keeps you from working on the busy work stuff instead of improving the business. And I've heard people talk about working in the business versus working on the business. You as a business owner, when you're delivering your service, you're working in the business. You're doing the things in the business to make the business operate. But as a business owner, you're also a manager, an executive at that
Yep.
point. You have to work on the business. You have to look at the business as a system. How do I build the business? What's my strategy? What do my processes need to be? How does the business need to work in order to generate money profitably? And that's the piece of working on the business, coming up with new product ideas, new initiatives, new, business development and partnership uh, opportunities, channel partners or things like that. That's where you need to be out there working on the business as well, not just working in the business. If you spend all your time working in the business, that's another surefire way to burn yourself out.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like being to me when I start thinking about that, especially when I get caught up in, as we said, am I working on this website too much? Am I looking at a logo? I'm trying to build a training academy. So do how much of this should I be outsourcing? And and when I feel like I get on a to me, and it's such a unique or individual feeling when I get this. I think it's individual at least. I've never actually said this out loud. When I feel like I get on a hamster wheel, if I get into a project and I start running, or okay, I'm making progress, I'm making progress, I'm making progress, I'm making progress. If I see the same part of the project, kind of like again now view your progress as on the outside of the wheel, not what you're seeing around you physically, but of the actual surface of the wheel. If I kind of see, I've done 1 lap, I've done 2 laps, I've done 3 laps, I start going, I've gone back to that main page a lot of times again, and this is where the idea of good, perfect, good enemy or perfect enemy of good, is this good enough? And when I'm doing it, you're right, I am going to spend a lot more time doing it. So I've actually taken to, if I feel like I've seen it 3 times in a row, kind of 3 strikes, like the same outcome of something that I'm trying to progress and move on, that's when I go, maybe I'm going to rely on somebody else to really help save me some time, and also develop a relationship with them, because that
Yeah.
you can certainly help develop relationships, and relying on your outsourced partners and folks to help save you some money in the long run.
One of the things, it's a bit of a shifting gears. I don't know a good way to transition directly to this. So, we'll just kind of jump to this. Like, as you're working in your business, like you're going to have certain, liabilities and risks and things that are out there. And when we talk about liabilities in normal parlance, most people use the word liability as like, oh, it's a liability. That's something you could get in trouble for, something that could be bad for you, or something. But when we're looking in business specifically, yes, it can be a liability. Like it could be a risk, like a legal liability, but that liability generally is around what that's going to cost you in some way. So in business, you have assets and you have liabilities. Assets make you money, and liabilities cost you money. Uh, so, as you're running your business, managing business liabilities, the things that are going to cost you money, and the risks, especially that you may run into where things don't go the way you expect them to go, is another uh, important thing to look at. And in cyber, when we're dealing with cyber risks, we do a risk assessment and we identify, okay, these are the risks that we're concerned about, and then we have to decide what we're going to do about them. you know, Risk treatment strategies is the fancy way of saying, what are we going to do about these risks? And, in cyber, we can accept the risk. We can say, oh, you know what? That risk is there, but we're not worried about it. We're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to let it ride. You can avoid the risk. You can mitigate the risk, or you can transfer the risk. So avoiding the risk is deciding, we're not going to do that thing that presented the risk after all. Um, I'm trying to think of an example of that. Maybe something that's not cyber. Let's say your business is mowing lawns in the summer. Maybe you rake leaves, do leaf removal in the early part of the fall, and you think, you know what, I could do Christmas lights in the late part of the fall before winter sets in and make some extra money before my seasonal business kind of shuts down for the winter.
Yep.
But as you're thinking about that potential new business venture or initiative or, service offering, it presents some new risks. And you could look at the risks with that and decide, you know what, the risks of doing this, now I got to get up on people's roofs. Yeah, I can carry insurance. I can transfer that risk, But if I get hurt, like I'm still hurt, and I don't know what that's going to mean for me in the long run with my business. Like, that insurance might not be enough. And, maybe you can mitigate with some safety equipment and that kind of stuff and some extra training, but maybe you'll look at that and say, you know what, I'm just going to avoid that risk. We're not actually going to go down that path. Anyway, we're not going to offer that new service offering because there's just too much risk
Hmm.
around that.
Hmm.
So identifying business risks is a really important thing. And again, we're used to working with cyber, but there's a lot of risks out there just in general business risk in, by nature of doing business, um, in the market, like what the economy does, what consumers are going to do, what competitors are going to do, what your vendors are going to do, um, all of those things. Like right now, we're dealing with risks. A lot of small business owners I see online in communities. What are we going to do about tariffs? Like I see a lot of them asking, "Hey, are you folks worried about these tariffs?" And like, do you have like what are your costs going to do? Like, what are you going to do about pricing to deal with this? Like, I'm seeing these conversations now, following the recent election, and with Donald Trump talking about putting these tariffs in place. These are risks that small business owners need to figure out, how am I going to deal with them?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so identifying those risks is really important. Any thoughts on that before I jump to the SWOT analysis thing?
I think I've always been lucky. I'm putting air quotes, big air quotes, like my whole hands are making big quotes. Lucky. My friends is like, you're lucky. This you at the right place at the right time. And I've always been like, no, I think I just always planned well. And I think one of the things that I always include in my plans, and it's been one of those things that I've gotten into arguments with friends, family, even in relationships over it, because I always include some form of speed bump just in my plans. A hurdle, a speed bump, I always put them in there. And but I kind of move them, like if I was putting everything in a line, I bold everything, and then but I put the speed bumps off to the side, still line items where they might happen, and like the font's grayed out, it's in edit mode, it's over here, but it's still a thing that in my head I still think about. So, but certainly when it comes to, like, yeah, like you said, the liability, do you want to get up on a roof? Like, okay, the 1 story roof, okay, you're probably okay. A 3 or 4 story, if you fall off that, that's potentially life ending, right? That's not
Mhm.
maintaining insurance anymore. That's you ending your life, your family. You're hurting a lot of people potentially. Again, like you said, maybe that's not worth it for me. Um,
Yep.
so when you start to think about, yeah, should that idea go out the door because the risk is too inherent? Absolutely. Think about that in your plan. Put those speed bumps in. If this doesn't work, then if then, and then move to the next statement. Put as many of those in there as you can. But again, don't put so many in there that you're afraid to try something new, but put enough in there that you understand that if you spend too much time, again, talk about what we've talked about today. You spend too much time working on the website, and you launch the website, and the website makes you no money. You have spent 90 hours on a website that you just did unpaid. Is that going to hurt the business? The answer to that is yes. Just because you did it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt the business. But
Yep.
there you go.
Yeah.
I think we're on the
Exactly.
same page.
Yeah. And and dealing with risks, like there's a really simple way, that a simple tool, I should say. Uh, they talk about this in business school. So like this is really common stuff. Some of our listeners, a lot of our listeners probably have heard about this before. Maybe done this. Like I think even in like economics class and stuff in high school, like we did a little bit of this. Like this is like business 101 stuff. But this particular tool is really, really handy, and it helps with figuring out what, kind of what your risks may be, what you can do with about them in a really, really lightweight sort of risk assessment sort of way, but that's not scary like risk assessment that people's eyes glaze over when we in cyber do risk assessments. Um, and this tool that I'm talking about, you've probably heard about this at some point in your life. Maybe you haven't, but the SWOT analysis, um, and SWOT, SWOT, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's part of a way of doing business planning. And so I would recommend, as you're working on your business plan, like I said at the beginning of this episode, have a plan, but be willing to change. But having a plan requires doing some planning. And this is a tool you can use in that planning activity because, and the way this works, take a piece of notebook paper, computer paper, whatever you have, and just draw a couple lines, to divide it into quadrants. Doesn't really matter what order they're in, but one quadrant, you make a list of what are my business's strengths? What are my strengths, my business's strengths? What are my business's weaknesses? Everybody has weaknesses. Like nobody's great at everything. Those are your weaknesses. In cyber terms, those may be your vulnerabilities, so to speak. But from a business standpoint, like what are my weaknesses? What are the things I'm not great at? And I know, like you got to be honest and admit those things to yourself. What are the threats? What are the things that could go wrong and happen to the business from outside sources, inside sources, whatever? But because that helps you identify those risks, and then opportunities is now based on my strengths, knowing these weaknesses, knowing these threats. What are my opportunities to move forward now with the business to make the most of my strengths that will uh, minimize the weaknesses, maybe avoid or mitigate those threats, and move forward. And just that 4-box way of doing it, that the 4-quadrant way of doing this for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats works really, really well to go through this, and it can help you identify those risks. And as you think through it, you kind of have to decide: am I going to avoid the risk? Am I going to mitigate the risk? Am I going to transfer it, to my insurance company or whatever? Or am I just going to accept it as you go? So I don't know, it's so easy, but so effective. So I wanted to make sure I talked about that here. So I know we talked about contracts and that kind of stuff in prior episodes, but I think one of the things it's really worth mentioning here as well, when you're talking about keys to success and dealing with things that can go wrong, you don't work without contracts. Like
Never.
you can't. If you have no contract, you have no protections.
I'm there with you. I wouldn't touch a job without a 10.5 foot contract pole. I've had people, oh, come on, you just do it real quick, this, that, the other. It's one of those things that, yeah, without protection, I don't do it these days. I have done favors in the past and didn't get paid, or I've done something, and I saw some contractors today that still owe me a few bucks, and my only recourse is to go after them in court. Just because I didn't put in the right amount of wording and they had used that, or oh, my state doesn't care about that. So again, this is goes back to our verbosity on contracts. Just make sure you're very clear, concise. That's the thing. I don't write a contract myself. Now that being said, sometimes I will, but for the most part, if it's a new client, if it's something that I haven't seen before, if it's something new in a state I haven't done some of business before, I make sure to send it over to my lawyer and make sure these days, because I want to make sure that I am protected, they are protected, we are protected, because and as a business partner, as a business entity, if I'm connecting to, again, on a technical level, if I'm connecting to your network, we're on the same network. Some pen testers don't think about it that way. If my home network, my work network, my office network, my remote network, my VDI gets compromised, my clients are in fact compromised. So I have a contract that says I will do the very best that I can with these things to make sure that these things don't happen. This is why I want you to be protected. I want me to be protected, because if they're compromised, I'm now pretty much, I might as well consider myself compromised. That doesn't mean that if I'm on a network and they get compromised, then I write all my clients to say, I've been compromised. No, what that means is I'm going to now, if I was on the network within 30 days of a compromise, or prior to, or a compromise. I'm looking at a machine. Like if my machine wasn't on the network anymore, yeah. But point being, I want my contracts to protect not just me but my clients too. Now that's an interesting twist that I've included, and some of my clients have loved that. Like, oh, okay, like so if you get compromised while in the process of connected to our network, I have the right insurance, cyber insurance, E&O, and things to make sure I take care of them. But yeah, I at this point, I won't do any work until there's ink on a piece of paper that says I should legally be able to do this work.
And that contract sets expectations as well. So it's not purely about legal liability, but also
Right.
liability from a happy customer standpoint. Like if you do work for them and you don't have a contract and you weren't on the same page and they're like, I'm not paying for you for this. This wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't what we talked about. Now you've put in time and I'm not going to pay, but you didn't have a contract that said what you were and weren't going to do. You take on some risk there. Um, One of the things that you were talking about around breaches and that kind of stuff, it also ties in with like confidentiality agreements and non-disclosure agreements as well. Like that gets caught or included. I should say that gets included in contracts generally as well, either as a separate uh, a document or as part of a master services agreement or something. There's generally some sort of a confidentiality or non-disclosure agreement in place, and those generally will run both ways, uh, or at least they should run both ways, because you don't want to share something with a client and then have your client go share your intellectual property or something um, elsewhere as well without your permission. So having the legal counsel review your contracts, like that's a fantastic suggestion, uh, because it keeps you from being in these like weird positions where you don't realize you have some level of liability. So like you got to have the contract, but also have your lawyer go over it, because if you're not a lawyer, like that's a perfect example of outsourcing. Like, they're the expert in that. Let them look at it, because what you're going to pay for them for a couple hours of their time to review a contract is minuscule compared to what the ramifications in potentially tens of thousands of dollars of having a contract, no contract, and then not getting paid or what have you. There's another thing that this makes me think of too, that when you have your legal counsel review your contracts, a lot of times when you have a contract with another uh, company and you're using their paper, their contract template, there's generally an indemnification clause in that contract. A lot of times it's one way, that you're agreeing to indemnify them, but they're not necessarily agreeing to indemnify you.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
and that's really important as you're reviewing contracts. Like that's one of the top things that I look for when I do contracts is if that indemnification clause isn't mutual. Um, and that's one of the things that I would want legal counsel to also look for there. And for and indemnification is a term that doesn't come up outside of like legal and business and contract
It's
stuff
certainly an
really. So
SAT
a
term.
lot of people haven't heard of that word. Basically, what that means, indemnification means like the one party won't hold the other one. It will hold them harmless, due to a mistake or what have you, um, and generally will help also to defend them as well. So, in the event of a lawsuit, if you are doing work for your client and something related to the work you're doing for that client, a customer of theirs sues them over it, or you get sued, as a result of that, that mutual indemnification then would have, depending on who was at fault, maybe who was negligent or who made the mistake, could go either direction. If it was you that made the mistake and you've got that mutual indemnification, you would reimburse them for those damages that caused them to get sued by their client. And that's usually what's in contracts if you're using their paper, but you also want it the other way around, that they will also defend or reimburse you. So if there's something that they do that causes you to get sued, or they breach contract or something that causes damages for you, that they'll also indemnify you. So I know that probably wasn't the greatest explanation of that, but it just to say, you want to make sure in your contracts that when your lawyers review it, when you review this thing, that the indemnification is going both ways and it's not just one way.
Absolutely. That helps. Again, but looking at our next thing, even like that helps with the confidentiality, non-disclosures. I love signing MNDAs, mutual non-disclosures. I want mutual
Yes.
confidentialities, just because you don't want me as your client talking about the work I do for you. I also kind of don't want you going to your other friends and other companies talking about the work I'm doing for you either. Like, again, not that I have a sensitivity of around a lot of my work, and my process isn't anything unique or special. But like, yeah, if I kind of don't like, I know it probably happens, especially being a pen tester doing compliance and scans and stuff. It's going to get shared. So I always tell the client, here's the internal report for you. And then I go and I've worked with, I've outsourced it. I made somebody help me make a very pretty or good looking, very straightforward, good looking business professional report. And then I go, here's the things we found, here's these things. And then this is the one you send to the people, knowing that, hey, sometimes the other one might get sent, but, I don't want my methodologies necessarily revealed. I don't necessarily want the tools I was using revealed to third parties that isn't me or isn't you. Um, and so certainly, again, it's something I like to make sure that's in my contracts too. Is please don't share my work.
Yes, I do similar things in mine as well.
Certainly, one of the things that I try to do again with my lawyer, again outsourcing between the mutual non-disclosures, indemnifications, and things like that, is also have them help review just business structures. Again, mine's fairly simple, but if you have S corps, they can get potentially complex. But then also, again, even tax plans, right? As we say, you should have a plan in your company, and it's not just a plan for how to run the company. You should have plans for marketing. You should have plans for technical issues. You should have plans for professional things. Whether you call this a policy, a standard, or not. Goes from there. I think that the idea of utilizing someone, again, outsourced, who's smarter than you in a variety of areas, including taxes, including legal things, would certainly not hurt. And especially utilizing, hopefully, for tax advantages. You know more about some of those than I would, especially for S corps. So, you got any ideas? Have you used your lawyer to plan for that? Because I know last you said you just, this is a year and a half you're in now.
Yes, yeah. So I did work with my lawyer uh, to plan for the switch from just a straight LLC to taking the S corp election and being taxed as an S corp. Uh, she helped me with all of that, especially because it was a mid-year switch, but also helped with making the decision. Because as I was talking about in one of the early episodes, when you're trying to choose within this, like there's more to it than just, well, I make more than X dollars, and so therefore that's the time to switch to an S corp. There's a lot more that goes into it with retirement strategy, um, business continuity, planning, those kinds of things as well. It's at this intersection of estate planning, business continuity planning, retirement planning, business planning, like all of that comes together to make the decision. And like you really do need to have somebody kind of help you through that process if that's not what you're already doing day to day. Like if that specific thing isn't your thing, outsource that. Get the advice from somebody to help you there, because they can help with, how do I structure this? They can help with, you know, do you want to have a holding company and then have your business under that holding company so that you could potentially spring up other companies under that same holding company? Like there's different ways you structure all of this stuff as a business owner. but it's different for everybody based on the type of business and their financial situation, their investment strategies, and all that kind of stuff. So it's just really important, and they can help you figure out how to do it without paying too much in taxes. You know, I don't mind paying taxes. Some people do. I feel like generally we get enough back service wise from taxes that I don't mind paying taxes, but I don't want to overpay. I don't want to pay more than my fair share just because I didn't plan something correct and
Right.
because I didn't talk to an expert to help me understand that if I just do this and this, it's going to change the situation and give me more deductions or let me do something differently that allows me to not overpay. Um,
What's a proper deduction, right?
yeah,
Is a laptop I buy for my niece a proper deduction? Like the day of, I go out, I buy it, give it to my niece. Is that a proper deduction? I will tell you, as a not CPA, not financial person, probably not. Now, if I have a device that I have purchased that is a number of years old, that's already been through its tax purposes, and I go, am I in the business of selling hardware? If the answer to that is no, then I can go, guess what? I can be in the business of now giving this device away, and that's probably fine. But me going out to specifically buy the device, probably not fine, right? Like there's it's a game. You got to play there within the rules, but the rules, by the way, are kind of loosely written. But that's why you need somebody a little bit smarter who go, not this year, but next year, do that. You're like, okay, good, thank you.
there was something we were talking about earlier that I wanted to come back around on. You mentioned relationships, and that's a really, really important part of business, at least to me and my philosophy and how I do business. Uh, I one of the big things that I advise people really strongly recommend is focus on relationships in business. Relationships with your customers, with your suppliers, with channel partners,
Hmm.
referral partners, whatever you want to call them. Basically, the people who are selling for you, making referrals or helping you find customers. Um, just those relationships are what are going to help you be more competitive. And just business is hard, but it's easier when you have good relationships and you focus on building strong relationships that are beneficial to your business. So business is hard. I don't want to scare people away there, uh, but we could talk a little bit about maybe give them the pep talk at this point.
Yeah.
Yes, it's hard, but like it's 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 worth it. So let's I guess Joe, let's give them a pep talk here.
Yeah. I think the whole reason we've done this is to say, hey, if us knuckleheads can do it, you can do it. I think again, we started all of this going back to the beginning because of the idea of getting that little bit of freedom in your life, you controlling the outcomes, you controlling a business. Yes, yeah, as the person I am, I believe everyone should own a business. It's gonna help you do a lot of things. There are a couple more write-offs. But it's not just for that. It's there. There's a level of freedom. There's a level of capability. There's, you get to play a different game when you have a little bit of extra income that you can put through a entity and sell things online, to sell your services, to sell your time, right? Um, and I think that the idea behind that is incredibly powerful, right? The idea of controlling your outcome with your own business rather than just having to hop onto the next passing ship. You can kind of own your own ship to a degree, right? Or at least a boat in the pond. You don't have to always be on somebody else's boat. And I think that allows you to direct where you want to go. That allows you to time when you want to potentially retire. That allows you to time the kind of benefits you want, the health insurances you want. Sure. Solo 401ks. Yeah. Hey, end of the year again. You talked about having that as an expense. You know what? My employer put this much away, but I wanted to put this much away. Fantastic. They hit a match. I can match my own match with my own solo 401k. Again, to me, it's allowed me a little bit extra freedom to determine here in the next handful of years, this will be the outcome I desire. Is it the outcome I'm going to get? I don't know, but it's certainly gearing me towards that is the outcome I desire, and I feel good about that. I feel that it's not been hard to do this. But again, now I can also bring on my friends. I can bring on people that go to my academies. I can help others. I can run a business the way that I see running a business is fit, right? Too, right? That doesn't mean that I'm doing it right. I might look at CEOs and owners and presidents of companies I've worked for in the past and go, I don't like that idea. Well, now I can either put it into practice or not put it into practice for myself. How's that? It's a lot of freedom to me.
Yeah, great points. It comes down to not forgetting your why, that we talked about in that, I think it was that
Yeah,
first episode of the series. Like, what's your why? Why are you doing this? Like, when things get hard, it can be easy to wake up and just think, "God, why am I doing this again? Why don't I just go work for somebody else? It would be easier." In some ways, yeah, it would be easier. And I think that every once in a while, sometimes I wake up in the morning and or have a rough day and just think, "How why am I doing this to myself?" Playing life on hard mode, uh, trying to be a business owner. But then after, when I remember my why and I realize, like, yeah, it's frustrating at times, or it's hard at times, it's a lot of work at times, but I have that freedom that you're talking about that I didn't have before. And I think that's a big piece of it. So it helps me, keep my head up. So I guess that's, advice to, listeners, when you start your business and you get into it and you're feeling like, this is hard, you know, keep your head up. That's part of success is attitude. Don't forget your why. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Because you got so much more in your control when you're the owner of the business. Um, and you have a lot when it comes to client expectations as well that are still in your control. So setting expectations with clients, how you frame things, how you do that. So even when you feel like, gosh, something's not going well, or I'm behind, I didn't get something done, or there was a mistake in something, like, it all depends on how you frame expectations with clients, and keep things kind of under your control, and it makes it a lot easier. And because you've got that control, in a lot of ways, you've got the ways to, make the unknown known, for yourself. When you're working for somebody else, you don't have all the context. You only have what they share with you. Whereas when you're owning your own business and you're that person, you've got all the context. You've got everything you need. So at that point, it's easier to make the unknown known, to make decisions. You can figure out, what information do I need to know? Where can I find that? How am I going to get it? Who do I need to ask? Whereas when you're working for somebody else, you may get stonewalled. You may say, "Oh, I need this information." And your boss, or your, grand boss, or whatever, multiple levels up, maybe the executives don't want to share some particular context of something, and you just have to deal with that. So I don't know, that's a big thing for me, is just, how much control you've got, and the ability to solve problems and kind of manage the risks yourself, in the process. So, and Joe, you had put mantra in the notes. I'm not sure what that means. Do you want to talk about that?
yeah. I mean, I feel like that's the kind of the same thing. Telling yourself over and over and over. Right. Um, Example: when I'm teaching, I'll go over the same thing a couple times. Not because I think my students are silly or dumb or foolish, um, because I want them to know the thing. Right? Why do we cover 1 plus 1 so many times while we're learning what math is? Um, well, you should also be telling yourself, you said the why. Very much my mantra is my why. I exist in this place right now. I try not to talk about too often globally my individual goals anymore. My individual goals are my goals. But what I do say is I want success, health, wealth, and success, right? Like health, wealth, and happiness. And to me, my mantra stays: am I doing something today for my health? Am I doing something today for my wealth? Am I doing something today for my happiness? Well, you can pinch a few of those together. Well, my happiness and wealth can go together. My happiness and health can go together. Being healthy because I'm, making money and putting it into my health insurance, and recently I've undergone a slight health journey. Okay, but that required some money, the money and again, just mixing these terms up. To me, my mantra every day is, why am I doing the thing I'm doing? And is it leading to my current goals? My personal goals currently are more and more freedom. I want to not, maybe I do take my business a little bit more seriously and start running it, but also, can I continue to utilize my friendships and relationships at my business and stay I'm a director, right, at my main job, but that doesn't mean that I can't not teach. Well, my day job, my passion is teaching, but the day job allows me to be in a position where I see and get to do a lot of those things. Is that leading to my end goal still? Yeah, absolutely. It's still a level of freedom. I'm making an income. I'm saving the income, and it's helping me lead to health and wealth. But also my mental health, is it struggling? No, because I get to take the time to go to conferences and pay myself to do those things, right? Like, so I made a few side bucks. I get to go to that. So my mantra again is, health, wealth, and happiness. But my sub goals are that, what am I doing every day to get towards that? And so I think, so just reminding yourself, even when times get tough, when you run into those hurdles, and I'm not talking about run into a stopping hurdle. You ever seen these athletes jumping hurdles? They like clear them by centimeters. And now imagine smacking your gut right into one. Bam! Oh, oof. You got to keep going though. You can't stop. You're running a business. You're literally, the words running a business. There's going to be hurdles. You're going to hit. You got to figure out how to discard it. You got to figure out, is this leading to my goals? But I think everybody has very similar goals. They want to be healthy. They want to be happy. They want to be in a place of security. And find your mantra. Repeat it to yourself, even when those times get tough. Find your mantra and repeat it to yourself. When you're the money, you've got the most amount of jobs you've ever had. You are hiring people. You are enjoying this flourishment. But don't forget where you started. Why? Why did I start this? Because I wanted this for me. You have it for you. Try to share that, right? And I think staying humble, having humility along the way, and making sure you remain flexible along the way for those plans that may change. And that's the whole reason I'm doing this. So I hope that it inspires other people to go, okay, yeah, I see that.
I love it. I loved how you equated success with, your mantra, with happiness
Yeah,
and with your why, because it's easy and a lot of folks do this. They equate success with achievement, but an achievement is a point in time.
yeah,
And when you equate success with an achievement, I did this thing. Okay, that's great, but once you did it, now it's over. Like,
yeah. And that feeling can get lost.
and then you can fall into that trap of, well, okay, success is a pattern of achievement, but that just keeps you on the hamster wheel that
Yeah,
you were talking about before. And what really helped me was reframing success. And this was a few years ago, where I kind of did an exercise for myself, sort of one of these stream of consciousness exercises, thinking about success. And at the end of that, like, stream of exercise, and asking myself why, and that kind of stuff, I came to the conclusion that success is about self-actualization,
Mm-hmm.
which is just a fancy way of saying what you just said. Success is about happiness. Success is about not just achieving your goals, but it's about your mantra and your why. Why am I like? Why am I here? It's that actual fulfilling your own destiny, that self actualization, being the best you that you can be in your life. Like that's what success is about. It's not about like individual achievements or anything like that. And when you reframe success that way, I find it really helps. So on days or weeks or months as a business owner, when you're discouraged, to think about success in terms of self actualization instead of achievements. Because if your success criteria is purely based on achievements of
Mm-hmm.
X number of dollars of sales in a month or a quarter, and you miss that, were you not successful? I mean, you may not have achieved your goal, but like if everything else in your life is working great and you missed it by, $10,000 or something like that, um, but you had enough, you were fed, you paid all your bills, you put some money in savings, you weren't working 100 hours a week, maybe you're working 20, 25 hours a week or something, um, that time, like, that sounds pretty successful to me. And,
Yeah.
people, it's really easy to think of success in business as achievements and milestones and not get back to the root of why am I doing this to begin with. So that's something that has been immensely helpful to me. And my wife struggles with this, um, and I have to constantly kind of help her when she gets, discouraged in her business. Because in children's literature, children's illustrating and writing and stuff, like it's a really, really hard business to be in.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, just because you didn't sell a book didn't mean you're not good.
Right.
It doesn't mean
Right.
you're a failure. It just means you didn't sell a book today. Whatever. Like, so it's so important to frame things and not get down on yourself, because that's another piece of burnout when you start feeling like the futility of stuff, like nothing I
Yeah.
do matters, like when you get down on yourself because you're missing milestones or whatever, and you lose sight of the big picture, it can be really easy to spiral out of control. So keeping your chin up when things get rough, and remembering your why and how that's tied to true success, is definitely important. So before we wrap up, because we're running longer here than I was expecting, because there's been more to cover than I actually thought there was going to be. Uh, I want to kind of talk a little bit about resources that folks can use to help with learning and just making sure that their businesses are successful, that they can do what they need, achieve what they need to do in order to become what they want and build the life that they want. Um, you know, for for me, resources that I've used, like I love YouTube. There's so much fantastic content on
So
YouTube.
much.
Um, there is a lot of really, really great business content um, on YouTube as well. Uh, One channel in particular that I want to mention, uh, for folks that either are thinking about starting a business or have started one and like are interested in like business finance and tax and that kind of stuff. It's a guy on YouTube named Carlton Dennis, and I'll put this link in the show description. Um, Carlton Dennis on YouTube. Uh, I think he calls his channel Tax Alchemy or something like that, but the
Yep.
main
Yep.
part of the
Yep.
channel is just his name. Phenomenal explainer
I like
of
him.
this
Yep.
stuff. Um, yeah, I just can't begin to compliment him enough for the amount of information that he shares for free on YouTube, and how clearly he explains it in plain English for somebody who's a business owner, not a CFO. Um, is I don't know, that's huge to me. Um, and then also on YouTube, but also in in podcasts as well. I've mostly listened to it as a podcast. There's one called The Side Hustle Show that has
Hmm.
been really instrumental in shaping some of my approach to business. The biggest thing that it helped me with my approach to business was, instead of looking at business as a success or failure type of thing, where, oh nope, I'm either gonna, gotta sink or swim, whatever. But what if I'm not successful? But that podcast taught me to look at business as a series of experiments, and it's about learning and testing and follow the scientific process. I think I need to do this. This is the outcome I'm expecting. I'm going to test it and I'm going to see what happens and I'm going to learn. And you can iterate on that. And so the folks on that show, um, he has different guests constantly, tons of episodes. Strongly recommend going back to the early part of his catalog, because in the early part of the show, he was doing a lot more learning and exploring himself, um, which I felt like actually made me learn more as well. Whereas the more recent stuff that's just coming out now, it tends to be just, somebody gets on and they talk about their business and what they did, and but they don't dig in quite the same way that they did in the early part of the catalog for the Side Hustle Show. So definitely recommend that. But like, you may get a ton of great ideas from listening to what other people have done and side hustles that they've done and things that they've done, and talked about how they've scaled them up into full-time businesses. Uh, it gave me a lot of, it gave me more confidence once I started thinking about business as a series of experiments and not like this all or nothing kind of thing. But also just hearing all these different ways that people built and scaled their particular company and business in a way that was right for their business and what worked for them and why it worked for them. Um, I don't know. It's small business. You got to be very creative. So just hearing all these different things just gives you that much more to work with, uh, as you're trying to come up with ideas. So I don't know. Joe, do you have any particular podcasts or YouTube channels that you like or that you found incredibly helpful?
Yeah, I like Carlton as well. Occasionally, Diary of a CEO brings on some folks. There's some folks on there that pitch some, we'll say, some preachy and interesting things. But I've liked a selection of the folks that have gone on Diary of a CEO. It's a longer podcast, like 2 to 4 hours sometimes. Gets to be like a Huberman or like a Rogan style podcast, which is like, dude, I don't have time for multi hours. Right, hour and a half, cool. 2 hours, I'm in for it. But then when you start going over 2 hours, I'm like, man, I can sit for a Marvel movie. I can't sit for a Lord of the Rings marathon anymore.
Yeah.
um, I think that's a good way to put that. But I consume a lot of content. There are we were talking about tax attorneys. I forget the lady's name. She's been popping up in my YouTube feed for sure. Something tax attorney. Oh, real advice from a real tax attorney. She goes over some things. She's even gone over Dave other financial gurus. She's actually even had Carlton on there a few times. Like, that's not necessarily true due to this section. She's like, you could probably get away with it, but if you don't want to get a call from the IRS, just be careful. And I was like, okay, I could see from both perspectives. Like, Carlton's like, yeah, save yourself some money by doing these things this way. And she's like, well, you could do it that way, but really you should be doing it this way. And I forgot her name right now. Lovely lady. Wow. But yeah, again, I consume as much of those pieces of content from those circles, just because, as much hacking and cybersecurity content as I consume. I probably consume actually these days more business friendly, how to, and a little bit more legal stuff, like, oh, why you should be building a trust. We talked about some of that, like when you talked about you went to the S corp, so then you added your wife as a someone who can, if something happens to you, knock on wood, nothing happens, but your wife would be able to interact with the the banks and the other business entities to shut it down, to get the money to do the things, to pull your 401k. Trust and estate planning, and again, your lawyer, if you get a generic lawyer or a specialized lawyer and all these things, they should certainly be able to help you do all those things. And again, just knowing that those things are out there. This is one of those things that me growing up the way I grew up, not very well off at all, but coming to a point where I'm doing pretty good for myself now, to go, hey, if I knew about these things 20 years ago, if I knew about these things, well, I can't say 40 years ago, but when I was 18, a teenager, I might have been able to convince my family to help do some estate planning and things earlier in life. That would have made things a little bit easier. But how do you know? How do you know? You don't know what you don't know. And that's such a silly turn of phrase, but it's absolutely true. And I think consuming shows like your show, consuming shows by multiple people. Mark Tilbury, he's an English bloke. I believe he's English. Now, hopefully, I'm not insulting him. He's not like Australian. I think he's English. Um, and I like him because he tells it too. He did not grow up very well, but he was at the right place at the right time. Certainly, model planes to this, to a couple stores, to 2 stores, to 4 stores, to 100 stores, to that business is going down. I can pull my money out, transfer to these other businesses, and um, just looking at the risk that he's taken, and he talks about some of his massive failures. If you're working hard, you put a business together, there's very much a chance, more of a chance than not doing it, that you could be a millionaire.
As a business owner, absolutely. It's a lot harder as an employee. I've heard it say that, it's really, really hard to save your way to wealth. That, the way that you achieve, wealth is to either own a business or invest somehow, more than just, saving and that kind of stuff. Owning a business can turbocharge that. So, um, there's some other stuff, other resources that I want to mention as well. The SBA, government entity, the Small Business Administration, I think is the A of that SBA. Uh, they have loans for small businesses that have more approachable interest rates and maybe easier to get than loans from banks and that kind of stuff. More traditional loans, kind of similar to the way, you've got FHA loans for, first time home buyers and that kind of stuff. When you're buying a house, there's government programs as well for businesses if you need business loans. So the SBA is a good resource for that. I'm a fan of trying, kind of organically bootstrap and not use debt if I don't have to, but that's not always possible depending on the type of business and your goals and how you want to scale and that kind of thing. Like you may need a business loan. So that's a place where I would start if you're looking for debt-based funding. And then there's grants. Um, I can't tell exactly where to find grants because
SBA as
different
well.
organizations, different
Yeah,
government departments will offer grants. Um, but if you are starting a business, especially if you are from an underrepresented uh, group, you know, women-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, there it is worthwhile to go look for grants and programs and things for you that you may be able to qualify for. There's also stuff where you can become a like certified women-owned business. And again, I don't know the organization that does that particularly, but like which could give you potentially some more opportunities, to sell and grow your business. So it's definitely worth looking into uh, things for that. And grants are nice because they're free money.
yeah,
um, so I don't know, any thoughts on those before we jump over to the last group of stuff here?
100%. I haven't been able to win any grants, even though I am disabled, marginalized. Um, I've put in for a couple for disabilities, put in a couple for blind, multiracial, and things like that, and they're tough. It's definitely competitive. Yeah, I will say I was using this site called Hello Alice. I don't by saying them, I'm not endorsing them or saying they absolutely do things. I have had another buddy and another friend. She was able to win a couple of grants from there. A UPF, or yeah, I think it was UPS one. They're pretty generous. Like that's a $10,000 grant. I think they do them like they do 10 10,000 grants 4 times a year or something like that, and it's wild. Verizon's done a few that I've put in for, again, being disabled, going directly to like Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind and some of these other resources. It's certainly hard to win them. I will say I've definitely used a bit of AI to help me find them and search them. The ChatGPTs, Geminis of the world going, hey, I'm looking for grants, and they'll be like, oh, check these out. And yeah, it's tough, but yeah, I would rather do. I do have funding. I've said that before, but I don't. Again, it's what I owe the funding is zero. What I there is a credit card balance. But that goes up monthly, it goes down monthly, goes up monthly, goes down monthly. Pay it off as best as I can. Unless again, I have the payment to be the exact what it should be. Sometimes there's an extra fee on there, and I got to go manually do it.
Another great resource that I've used personally is SCORE, SCORE. Uh, SCORE is a nonprofit organization. They partner with the SBA quite a bit, but SCORE provides free mentors, business mentors, and free training. Uh, so, as a small business owner, if you are looking for help in a particular area, and you want to talk with a business mentor, somebody who's been there, done that in small business before, um, you can do that. And when I was starting my podcast, I contacted SCORE and they actually put me in touch with a business mentor who had done some podcasting before. And I got to talk to him. He had some good ideas uh, on things, on ways to integrate the podcast into some of my marketing and that kind of stuff. But just ways to approach it and some ideas on how to make it valuable, which was fantastic for me. Score is hugely useful, and like I said, they got free training as well. And just to be able to access people with that kind of experience and good quality training for free um, is pretty amazing. Um, Other resources that you shouldn't forget about as you're getting your business off the ground, your local chamber of commerce, another one
Mm-hmm.
that I'm a fan of. I know my local chamber of commerce has, business before hours network events and business after hours networking events,
All the
and
time.
you know they've got a directory, and they can send stuff out. They're constantly things going on to meet people and get out. And if you're looking to network face to face and looking for local clients, now most of my clients are all over the place because I do everything remotely. I have a few that are local. Uh, but one of the other nice thing about the chambers of commerce as you're first getting your company started is oftentimes when you sign up, you'll get listed in their directory, but they'll also like have a link in the directory, their public directory that goes back to your website. And when you're first getting started, just any links back to your website from something like a chamber of commerce that's kind of already authoritative and has some Google juice to it, it's going to help you some when you're brand new.
Chamber of Commerce. I actually forgot it, but I wasn't going to mention that. But yeah, I know lots of people have lots of success from those meetings. Like in fact, like able to build solid books from just attending the chamber of the weekly chamber or monthly or however often it is locally for you meetings. And I know a guy who went in. Wanted to develop a nonprofit as well, and just goes to those meetings and just attending the meetings, telling people what you do, and then they go again this time of year. Hey, I need a little bit of funding for my nonprofit. Oh well, we've
Yeah.
got a lot of money on the books we need to write off, and his nonprofit is literally funded through next year. At this point, he could take on more work with his nonprofit if he needs.
Something else that I just thought of too with the chambers of commerce that actually, from a marketing standpoint, could be really beneficial for folks too, is chambers of commerce are often looking for content. Uh, so if your business specializes in you know cybersecurity, like we've been talking about,
Yeah.
as a cybersecurity consultant, you know we could sign up to provide a free masterclass to local business owners on cybersecurity awareness or on some particular topic related to cybersecurity in some way, or somebody with a different kind of business could talk about something in their particular area and kind of do a master class on that. Like, you don't want to make it spammy and salesy,
Yep.
but it helps build your your reputation, I guess. Like it gets your name out there and kind of helps you establish yourself in the community, in your local business community, as an authoritative source on that topic. Even if you're not selling something that day and you're just trying to help them, it's a great way to get visibility uh, and try to help folks. So that's another area where chambers of commerce can be very, very valuable, and it's
Yep.
worth. I think mine's like $200 or $250 a year to join, um, and I get regular. I get the director every year. I get regular emails and programs, and can attend stuff that they do, and so it's worth it as far as I'm concerned. So the last item that I have found very valuable as a business owner are communities online, other like-minded people, whether that's Discord or Slack uh, or Reddit. Um, there's a very active entrepreneur and small business community on Reddit in the small business sub
For
and the
sure.
entrepreneur sub. Um, Now, this is Reddit. Risk mitigation, you got to wear your flame retardant suit before you log in. But there are a lot of very smart people with a lot of great experience um, in those communities who answer questions and that kind of stuff. There's also a lot of jerks because it is Reddit, it is the internet. You are
The
in the
first
comments,
page.
uh, but that's an area. So Discord communities. Um, is another one. If you find Discord communities for small business owners to join, there's some Slack communities that I'm in for like cyber freelancers and virtual CISOs and those types of things. Um, Unfortunately, I can't name them because all of the ones that are really good are invite only. But
Yeah.
if you like reach out to me and talk to me, whatever, like I may be able to see about getting invites. The different ones have different processes to do invites, and so it's not totally open. Like some of them you can only invite one person a year, whereas other ones are more flexible than that. But uh, just simply, I don't want to throw names out because they're not open to just anybody to join. But
Right.
reach out to me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Reddit. There is another one that I have joined that is a pay community, uh, but the way it's done, it's a one-time fee. You pay once to join. It's not a subscription, um, and the guy that runs it, Daniel Vasallo and Louis Bacage, they've got a community called the Small Bets. Um, and similar to what I was talking about with looking at business as a series of experiments, that's the entire philosophy of this group is small bets, like idea, test, iterate quickly. Uh, but it's a pretty good sized community. There's so many people in there that are really smart and like have good ideas, really great experience to guide through all sorts of things. But like they give like lightning talks, master classes, they record videos of their talks. And for members, you can get access to all of the videos for prior talks. And so maybe somebody will do a master class on putting together a newsletter as part of, or building a marketing funnel, or some other business related thing. And that like there's hundreds in this community now of these videos of prior presentations that members have done. um, so for the cost of that one, I think it's smallbets.com. I believe they got the .com domain finally for that, so that's one to look at as well if you're interested and have a little bit of money to spend. But if you don't, Discord and uh, Slack communities and Reddit and stuff can still provide you access and people who can answer questions and things if you ask the right way.
I think communities are massive. I don't belong in any particular ones. I've been on Reddit for sure. I've been to a couple spots around the internet, freelancer stuff, but it's good to know that more and more of that's becoming a thing.
As we're getting ready to wrap up here, Joe, any like closing thoughts that you want to leave folks with, key takeaways, anything like that for this series?
I think again, I'll just go back to about uh, 10, 20 minutes ago and say, hey, this is for everyone. You should be doing this. I want you to be doing this. Whether you become a solopreneur and running a whole company on your own, whether you do it for side work, whether you're doing it for the business for even quote unquote hobbyist things, right? There are lines they draw for hobby things, but if you're making money and you want to get into this and you want freedom and security potentially, right? The security that it provides is you'll never fire yourself. You'll also may not get the jobs. But as long as you get a good book going and find a way to put a lot of the things we talked about together, finding reoccurring revenue, finding partners, getting channels, getting invited to things, going to commerce meetings, building, and do it smart. Spend the time doing all the things that are the right things. What are the right things? You'll have to figure it out. Initially, something might be right for you. Initially, something might not, and then eventually, something may not become the right thing for you. And so that's okay to go and outsource it, to talk to others, to help have other small business owners help you. Right? Building more business communities filled with people who might not be MBAs, bachelors of business, associates in business administration, things like that. Yeah, we're not the best at it, so maybe occasionally find the person that's good at it, learn enough from them, feel secure about it, do the thing, control your future, and stick to your mantra.
Yeah, control your future is, I think, kind of the crux of my kind of parting thoughts or key takeaways for listeners. Starting a business, I think we said in one of the prior episodes, starting a business is easy. Running a business is hard,
Yeah.
but it's not impossible. And it's not something that couldn't be done. You know, you just got to be willing to put in the effort, put in the work, and you can take control of a lot in your life. Um, it's kind of heartbreaking on places like Reddit and some of these communities. I occasionally will see somebody post a question about I want to start a business, but my family isn't supportive.
Oh,
They don't believe I can do it. Like I'm getting emotional just thinking about how these people feel.
yeah.
uh,
Wow.
but like to have their family tell them this isn't for you. That's for somebody else. You go get a real job because owning a business that's not for you. That's not for us. That's crazy talk to me.
Yeah, agree.
It's for all of it. It's for everyone. And there's so many people that are their own worst critics, uh, but or their families, you know, and there's so much opportunity out there to take control of your life and start a business and focus on helping people and be successful in terms of self-actualization, not
Yep.
just in terms of a bank balance. Because having a huge bank balance, if you're miserable going to work every day, what kind of life is that? Uh, so yeah, I think my key takeaway is like you can do this. Anyone can do this if they're willing to just take one step at a time and work through it. You don't have to do everything all at once. Yes, it's work, but like I said, some of it's hard, but it's not impossible, and it gets easier. Yeah, this is if you're thinking this isn't for you, I give that some more thought. I think is just kind of what I say to most people because I think a lot of people could see a lot of success as business owners. Uh, that maybe they don't believe because, they've had family or other people around them fill their heads with crazy ideas that
Yeah,
this isn't for
yeah.
them. So
I'll stay
anyway,
slow and
that's my
steady.
little spiel
Yeah, slow and
on
steady.
my little pep talk at the end.
All right, my friend, I've had a blast doing these.
Yeah, thanks again, Joe, and to all of our listeners listening that have gone through this entire series. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope it has been helpful. Thank you for listening. We're doing this for you. If this was helpful, if you start a business because of this, please tell us. We want to know. We want to hear. We want to boost you and know that, folks are doing things to make their lives better, and that, maybe we just had a little part of that to help give you some motivation. So we're returning after this episode next month. We're returning to the standard call-in radio show format. That first one, we're going to talk about compliance and some SOC 2 and that kind of stuff in small businesses. That'll be out in January. So until next time, I am Accidental CISO. Stay mindful.
Don't miss our next episode. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app and follow us on social media. Visit Focivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast for show information and links to our social media pages. This has been the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity.